Welcome to Shorty's SuperCoach. Today we're going to have a look at Carlton as part of the Shorty Shortlist series, where we're previewing each club in the lead up to 2016 SuperCoach and the AFL season, of course. Now, things are pretty bleak down at Carlton, and it doesn't get much better for their fantasy prospects. There's a few names, and I mean, in reality, I don't think we're going to pick too many players, to be honest, from the Blues this year. There's a few guys that raise interest and, a few numbers that are interesting, but largely I don't think there's many, maybe one or two that you might consider. And the first one's Matthew Kreuzer. I mean, there's been a lot of speculation about him and a lot of criticism cast upon him as the former number one pick, which seems so long ago. And his career to date has largely been marred by injuries, really. I mean, he's had the knee ACL done, and just recently, last year, he had the foot fracture, and, he just can't get on the park. I mean, since 2011, he's played 12 games, 2016, just the one in 2014. And 13 last year, which, was disappointing because I think he was looking to come back last year and, really have a good season. But again, the foot fracture really hurt him. So that's the obvious problem with Kreuzer. I mean, he's going to be someone that is always looked upon as injury prone, and that's disappointing because he's one of my favourite players and he has such great capabilities. One game that stands out for me for him back in 2011, round 13 against the Swans. Second game back from a long-term injury. He had 13 kicks, 11 handballs, 6 marks, 2 goals won, 7 tackles, 13 hit-outs, 150 SuperCoach points. I mean, that's what he's capable of. He, at his best, which we've rarely seen, he can be like another midfielder. He can rack up high numbers, and his ruck work has improved, as has his marking. And, that was probably the high point of his career so far, was mid to late 2013. That's his best averaging year, that's 97.9. But from round 9 to round 18, he averaged 116.3. So, huge numbers there, and that's when he really started to silence a few of the doubters and the question marks upon him. But again, 2013, that's the season you think 2014 is going to go bang, injury hits, and then again, he played the second half of last year, averaged 89.3, which is reasonable considering coming back off a long-term injury, and with the feet is always concerning. But the problem for our current prospects with him, I mean, that's what he has done and what he's dealing with. But for next year, the average of 89.3 takes him a rung below perhaps your elite, which makes him potentially tempting because he's underpriced for what we know he can do. But the fact that he played 13 games means he doesn't get a discount, which is, perhaps disappointing, just missing that mark. So with that in mind, it'd take a gutsy man to pick him, I feel. I mean, I really like him and at times I've been tempted, but the fact that Leuenberger is even better priced and perhaps a better option, they're both so injury prone, but again, another factor to look at is that number one ruck spot. The Blues also got Gorringe, so how much of that number one ruck, I should say, he will play will be largely what we'll be deciding on him. But I think the same goes with Leuenberger, which we'll have a look at when we get to the Bombers. But I think for Kreuzer, it's probably doubtful with the injury and the price tag being a bit awkward given the question marks, but he's someone to have a look at because he definitely has the ability to go 100 plus given all the right circumstances going his way. And another player for the Blues, another number one pick, and there's a few of them at the Blues, but Jacob Weitering, the most recent of them, he's a man that I think will be fairly popular depending on the pre-season defensive rookies and lower end price players we have, because yes, he'll be a little bit more expensive than your normal player who hasn't played any games and rookies, etc., because of the number one drafting status, but he's ready-made, 195 centimetres, 90 kilos. He's known for his intercept marking as well as shutting down. He's a mature player, like I've seen him speak, and everyone talks about how mature he is, ready to play. I mean, Towers, future captain, etc. I mean, the raps have been huge on him, and I think he'll get opportunity by round 1 for the Blues. I think that looks pretty likely and nothing new there, really. But also, with the likes of White and Jamison still around, considering they should be playing despite any injuries, he's not going to be forced to be thrown in the deep end and having to play on the absolute monsters, and he may have an opportunity to score some decent points. But I think having a good pre-season, he looks very likely to play a few games, and depending on what else we have to pick from in those lower end rookies in the defence, he may be someone that takes your fancy. But to be honest, that rounds it up for the Blues as far as obvious picks. I'll run a few names that you might look at. Bryce Gibbs had a poorer season last year with suspension and injuries, but I just don't think you can trust him. I mean, he's going to be a pure midfielder, and he's never shown that he can break out into that, say, 110 bracket, which is what we need in the midfield. He's consistently at his best, averaged around that 100 to 106, I think it is. But even last year, despite what he was struggling with that sling tackle that he missed a lot of weeks for and injury himself, he started the year quite poorly anyway before any of that stuff came into play. So he's probably someone you wouldn't be looking at. Dale Thomas as well. He'll be forever tempting, I feel. But he's played 30 games in 3 years. His body's absolutely shot. I mean, it's a long way you got to go back since he averaged 96.4 in 2012 and 109.4 in 2011. So his best days are done. I feel like there'll always be someone who mentions him or puts him in the conversation when you're thinking about it. But again, like Kreuzer with the injuries, the risk has to be weighed up, and I feel like in Thomas's case, the reward just simply won't be there. Jed Lamb, very interesting prospect. Drafted pick 21 back in 2010. He's only played the 22 games since then, and it's the graph has been on the decline since being at the Swans, then the Giants, and now he finds himself at the Blues. He'll get opportunity, he'll be cheap, but he's a bit of an enigma. You never know what you're going to get from him. He's not a consistent player. I feel like he's that player that, potentially his scores and ability can be decided on how the team goes. He's more outside, quick, pace, etc. The prospectus likened him to Stevie J in his draft year, and we haven't seen anything like that, and I doubt we're going to see anything now from him. He may be a player that if he's really cheap and you just happen to fit him in your structure and he has a good pre-season, you might think about it, but I would say doubtful. And finally, we'll touch on Nick Graham, who I think of those final four shout-outs that we'll call them, is probably your most likely. But his major problem is that he doesn't fit anyone's structure, I don't feel. He averaged 80.3 last year. If you take out his subbed game, he averages 90.2. So that's very impressive. He only played the 6 games, which will give him the discount as well. So you're getting the twofold there. You're getting a discount, plus his average is a bit misleading because he did have a sub-affected game. Ended last year, his foot injury caused him to end it, I think, in round 14 or around that mark. But his last 3 games were 101, 103 and 106. He's a ball magnet, very impressive player, should get opportunities at the Blues, and he's a hard-nosed sort of player. Lovely to be alongside Cripps and Murphy, etc., and Gibbs, I suppose. So he's a very good player, I think, and should be a player that will be at the Blues for some time and possibly someone we'll look at in a few years. But at the moment, where are you really going to fit him in? Because he's not overly cheap, he's not absolutely reliable, and he's a pure midfielder. So I think when you've got the likes of Amira, Liberatore as well, I think there's another couple that will come into the conversation too, towards that lower end, mid-price rookie sort of range in the midfield. I think it's going to be unlikely that you look at someone at Nick Graham's sort of price tag, but I think he'll be a player for the future, and it's always interesting when you take into account the sub-affected games, where it turns out to be, and the price that'll relate for him next year. But a few names there for the Blues, but I think it's going to be a bleak year for them, and I doubt we'll be casting too much an eye over Carlton's list for our SuperCoach prospects. But it's a few names to think about, a few players to look at over the course of the pre-season. So if you've got any comments to be made on the Blues, certainly give us your thoughts on that one. Subscribe to the channel, give it a like, share it around, because SuperCoach will be on us pretty quickly as the pre-season ramps up and footy season is quickly coming upon us, which is great to see. So give it a like, share, subscribe, everything. So yeah, we'll see you all soon, and we'll have a look at Collingwood very shortly.